8th grade students. Hopefully you had a good weekend and you rested up for the lessons to come as we continue to have a look at Louisiana as it was ruled by the Spanish at this time. Of course, let's bear in mind that if you think about the timeline where we're at right now, we are into the 1870s, 1880s. Around about that time, of course, if you recall back to your American history that you learnt in the previous grade, you'll know by now that the Americans and the British were fighting each other in the American Revolutionary War. And obviously the Americans won that war, but even though they won the War of Independence from Britain, they couldn't lay claim to control of New Orleans and Louisiana because the Spanish had that. So we'll continue to have a look at the Spanish reign of Louisiana. There are several aspects that you may want to take on board, including the architecture and some of the food and the festivals and the parties and all of the stuff that went on. And if you've ever wondered why people are buried above ground in New Orleans, most of you probably know this already because of the land being underneath sea level, and because the land itself is very saturated. That's why people in New Orleans have to be buried above ground. But all of that started during the Spanish reign of New Orleans, as we'll look at in further detail right now.
Spanish settlements throughout Louisiana were linked by the Camino Real, the King's Road. Across vast stretches of wilderness, it connected New Iberia, Natchitoches, and San Antonio. But in Spanish Louisiana, all roads led to New Orleans.
New Orleans's role as a major commercial center came during the period of Spanish domination at New Orleans, especially during the American Revolution. Language, architecture, Louisiana customs all have their roots in the Spanish period. What is today the Vieux Carré, the French Quarter of New Orleans, in its architectural style, really isn't French at all. Most of the colonial buildings in the French Quarter date from the Spanish period and show Spanish styles of architecture.
Under Governors Miro and Carondelet, Louisiana undertook ambitious new construction projects, especially in New Orleans. The city was built largely on the generosity of one man, Spanish philanthropist Don Andreas Almonester.
It was he who rebuilt the St. Louis Cathedral after one of the great fires, and he built the presbytere, the priest's house, and the cabildo, which was the city council.
From warehouses to public buildings to private homes, Almonester shaped the face of New Orleans.
Almonester was in many ways a typical Spanish bureaucrat. He loved precise numbers. He loved close accounting of things. He had, I think, a very truly generous, humane spirit.
Almonester gave New Orleans a first-rate charity hospital dedicated to providing the finest care to all its patients, whether they were rich or poor, slave or free. The only thing New Orleans needed more than hospitals was cemeteries.
Smallpox, yellow fever, cholera, scarlet fever, typhoid, malaria, every form of pestilence visited the port. It was a tremendously unsafe place to live.
Every summer, plagues claimed a share of the population. Soon New Orleans was skirted by vast cemeteries, built above ground like small cities unto themselves.
The marshy conditions of the land were such a problem to the living. They were even more of a problem to the dead people. So they began to bury people above ground, to build little vaults for them above the ground, and they'd use the same tombs over and over again. They just push the bones to the back and reuse these little stone edifices.
Plagues were not the only danger New Orleanians had to contend with. Fires destroyed 4/5 of the city's business district during Spanish rule. And if the fires weren't enough, there were the floods. Life in Louisiana was often harsh and short. So the people of Creole Louisiana learned to celebrate the passing pleasures of this world.
From the earliest times, people in Louisiana loved to eat. Governor Miro commented that he was making 4,000 pesos a year and he was spending 8,000 of it in entertaining, and it was expected of him.
But it wasn't just the governor who liked to entertain. New Orleans became a city famous for its sumptuous balls and masquerades.
All through the Spanish period and the American period, balls were everywhere. There were probably 3 or 4 a week. At one time, I think there were 50 ballrooms in New Orleans that were very well attended several nights a week.
Extravagance was the order of the day. A ball might begin with 50 dishes for supper.
Then around midnight, there would be a snack. Then about 3 in the morning, there would be breakfast. And then about 8 in the morning, before everybody went home, there'd be some more snacks and some more coffee. Fantastic amounts of coffee, cakes of every sort.
Of course, New Orleanians indulged in more than just coffee and cakes. One item alone constituted 1/3 of all imports to the city: alcohol. But while Creoles danced cotillions until daybreak in New Orleans, the age of revolutions raged on elsewhere in the world.